Okay, this is Robert Barrick, and I am here today to record the second part of the video that I started yesterday and posted on YouTube that is entitled Law Enforcement Weaponizing Domestic Airspace. And I'm going to be referring to some notes as I go forward with this video because there's a lot that I want to cover, and so bear with me. As I mentioned in the video yesterday, the purpose that I stated for doing these videos was to discuss and report on the misuse and exploitation of a surveillance drone and other grave misconduct by Indianapolis police officers. In enumerating and describing the 9 sensors on the surveillance drone, I singled out the ultrasonic detection sensor for special attention, and I explained that the reason I was doing so was that it was the sensor that these bored police operators of the drone had during their 24/7 surveillance of me weaponized to inflict a lot of physical and mental pain and suffering for the last 10 of 12 months. They employed the device nearly a year ago. It'll be a year, I believe, in about 2 weeks. And it was about 2 months after that that they began utilizing this ultrasonic sensor as a weapon of pain and torment. So in other words, for the last 10 months, I have been the test subject for the depraved ingenuity of these officers and its victim. To review a little bit, the sensor works similar to Navy sonar. I think a lot of us are familiar with how that works, where a ship will discharge a sound wave into the ocean to hit the floor in the hopes of locating where a submarine is positioned. Well, similarly, the detection sensor, the officers discharge the ultrasound at the person that they are seeking to discover whether they are concealing any weapons or contraband under their clothing. And the sensor on the drone is so powerful that it can actually send these waves into the body and ascertain whether someone is concealing contraband, for example, drugs in their stomach. The Indy officers exploitation of this sensor as a weapon entails 4 aspects. 3 of them have to do with the settings. I'm not an engineer and I'm not a scientist, but from my experience of them discharging and shooting me with this device for the last 10 months, multiple times, dozens, even hundreds of times per day, have given me kind of an insight into the way it works. And the 3 sensors that the 3 settings that seem to be involved are: 1 is the power setting. The second one is the modulation speed, either sort of slow or fast. And when I say that, when the device is discharged at, for example, at my pocket in the past, it feels like your cell phone is on vibrate mode and it's going off. So, have been dozens of times over the past year that I checked my pocket to see whether I had received a call when I had not. So it has this kind of a vibration feel, and so, as I said, it's a modulation. And I have researched this somewhat online. As I said yesterday, I encourage you folks to Google this information. The handheld version of what I'm discussing is referred to as a WAND, a Weapons and Non-Permitted Device Detector, WANDD. So besides the power setting and the modulation setting of slow or fast, there's also the diameter of the discharge. And when I'm saying diameter, I'm referring to the circumference. The sensor discharges an ultrasonic wave that can be either quite expansive, almost in the circumference of the torso, where they could shoot it at you and discern what you were carrying in all your pockets, or inside your, perhaps inside your stomach, or they can diminish or reduce the diameter to as narrow as a pin. And one of their more frequent and popular torture techniques is to reduce the diameter to this pin size where they can sting you. It feels like sort of, even though it's a sound wave, it has kind of an electronic stinging feel, where they'll sting me in my back or in my neck or on my face or on my legs, my feet, the bottoms of my feet. They can be very painful if the power setting is set at a higher, at a higher setting. Some of the variations of these settings that are discharged and used, the fourth aspect besides the first three, which I said were the power setting, the modulation, and the diameter, is the fourth aspect is where they discharge it on the body. So they pick sensitive areas to discharge the weapon. And so some of the variations of the settings that they've come up with and used on me over the year have been sort of a quick, harsh pressure discharge. This has been used at my hips, my knees, my shoulders. I have a condition known as avascular necrosis. It is where the joints are not getting enough nourishment, and so they start to degenerate. I was first diagnosed with this going on 12 years ago, and as a result I had to have hip replacements, so I have bilateral hip replacements. The condition also affects my shoulders, but the shoulders not being a weight-bearing joint, I haven't had surgical repair on them. So these are two locations, the hips and the shoulders, that these officers have mercilessly and excruciatingly discharged this device over the past months. Another variation on the settings is a slow, continuous escalating pressure, which they have applied, for example, to my intestines. Now, as I said, these board officers in their depraved ingenuity have discovered that by discharging it at my intestines, they can stimulate me to flatulate. And not only that, depending on how long they discharge it, they can force me to the restroom. Ostensibly, they're keeping information, they're watching and recording, and so they know eating habits when I went to the bathroom the last time, so they know when to execute these barbaric little discharges, and so they can force me to the bathroom. But what isn't so funny is that, depending on, again, on the power setting, they can simulate severe cramping in the intestines with a discharge of this device. Also, in this slow, continuous, escalating pressure, they can apply it. They've applied it to my cranium, to my skull, which I liken to, if you're a scuba diver, or even if you've seen movies that have to do with, submarines, you know that the deeper you go in the ocean, the more pressure, the more compounded pressure that there is, and it can crush, a submarine if you go low enough and they don't have, it's not working properly. Well, this is similar in the way that they discharge this device in a slow, continuous, escalating power setting. So they'll start it off on my cranium at a low power with a little pressure, and then they will increase it, and it will continue for 10, 15, in the past it's been up to a couple of hours. I mean, that is how craven and depraved and sadistic these officers have been in, torturing me. There is a narrow continuous pressure that they have used on my sinuses and on my ears. They can actually simulate the most severe earache that you've ever heard of. And they can go back and forth. You know, they can discharge it in this ear for a little while, and then, you know, then they can discharge it to the other. So this is another method of torture that these police officers of Indy PD have come up with to use with this detection sensor. Another sick and humiliating use that they've discovered is that on a low power setting, on a slow modulation, if they point it at someone's, at my genitals, they can effect a biological response. He. They can force me to get a hard-on. It is humiliating. But they have also used it of late to inflict pain. They have discharged the device at my lower abdomen, where they are simulating a hernia-like pain. They have discharged it at my groin area to cause pain, and they have discharged it at my scrotum to cause severe pain. Also of late, as much for the effect of terrorizing me as to inflict pain, they've inflicted it at my mouth and my gums and my teeth. Also at my eyes, my throat, and my chest. So those former, they're threatening tooth loss and blinding me, and on the latter, they're alluding to a threat of a lethal threat, where they're sort of communicating that at any time they could end me with the misuse of this sensor. All of these assaults, and I have been experiencing them every day for the last 10 months since I first started trying to access the courts to stop their criminality. And they're all terrorizing. Even when they have it on a lower power setting and they're just frequently discharging it to sting me everywhere or to cause a little pain in my shoulders or my hips, my knees, my back, they do so for an extended period of time where it's happening dozens or hundreds of times a day, and it's mental torture is what they're inflicting, and it's intentionally done. I'm sorry, I am referring to these so I can make sure that I don't miss anything. Oh, well, torture is defined as severe infliction of physical and mental pain and suffering. And that's what they've been doing to me for 10 months. But my father who died when I was 12 years old, he was in an accident that left him paralyzed when I was 3-4 years old in 1965. And he was in a wheelchair until he died 9 years later. And these officers know exactly what they're doing. Discharging at my prosthetic hips, discharging at my knees, discharging in the center of my back at my spine. These officers know exactly what they're doing. As I referenced in part 1 of this video, the drone is operated by at least 2 officers, if not more, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And mainly they are hovering the device over the location of where the target, me, is located. And they're watching. And they're listening. As I explained, you know, they can watch and listen wherever you are in utilizing this device. Ostensibly, they're also taking notes. As I explained, you know, that's how they know when to discharge it at my intestines to cause pain and suffering, because they know the last time that I evacuated. But whether anyone ever sees these logs, whether anyone ever sees these logs, the authentic logs, is unlikely, because what's more likely is rather they'll be seen in some falsified dual log, like dishonest accountants that keep two sets of books. But I don't want to get into. But this isn't a video about police dishonesty and duplicity. That would be a topic for its own two-part video. So these folks are watching me, and the life that they've carved out for me, with the complete and total stigmatization that they've imposed, has created sort of this artificial microcosm around me. And what I'm referring to there is that by making not one, not two, not 10, not 20, but hundreds and hundreds of stigmatizing calls to wherever I go, to whomever I interact with on a regular basis, they have utterly ostracized and isolated me. For example, during the first 3 months that after I arrived in Indiana, I was living with my family, and during the course of that 90 days, they made something somewhere in the range of 700 stigmatizing phone calls, smear calls I call them, and particularly to one relative who they basically enlisted after empoisoning them against me to assist them in turning the rest of my family against me. My first job in this city, the estimated smear calls was something in the range of 300, where eventually, again, empoisoned by these officers, I was fired from that job. And now, in the second job that I have, they have, I think the count is at something like 500 smear calls that they've made in the roughly 7.5 months that I've worked there. I'm sorry, bear with me. So this has all resulted in a very boring life for these officers to observe 24/7. I'm sorry. I apologize. I worked on this all morning and all last night after my first video, and I want to make sure that I'm capturing everything, so I apologize. So it is this boring life that's given them the opportunity to test and try out the other 7 sensors to decide which ones are fun, and they found this one, and they've developed how to inflict pain and torture by the use of this ultrasonic detection sensor. By their cruel and merciless stigmatization campaign, like I said, it's pretty boring to watch me because I am friendless, and my family won't even speak to me anymore. Where they've been empoisoned, and they've been told that instructed not to speak to me. And the justification for this has been my understanding that I'm the asshole, that I'm an asshole, which is categorically and unequivocally false. And anyone who speaks to me for 15 minutes knows that I am not a mean person. But that's what these officers are doing by constantly making these smear calls. But more about that in a moment. Besides ostracizing me and isolating me, which serves their purposes, they've also imposed poverty on me. Like I said, my first job I was fired from, and my second, I'm at risk at losing it, and with over 500 calls. This interference they have interfered with my work search as well. They have they have extinguished any interest a prospective employer has had in me with one stigmatizing phone call, preventing me from getting jobs that I would be qualified and experienced to have, that would provide me with a decent, even a good living, forcing me to look for jobs that are low wage, where basically they will hire anybody, because it would be more risky for these dirty officers to interfere and prevent me from getting those jobs, because they would risk exposure. And what they want to do is keep their dirty deeds and their illegitimate tactics and their cruelty secret and concealed. So, as I said, my first low-wage job I was fired from, and my second, what they've managed to do by poisoning my employers immediately is so reduce the hours that I'm given, where others are given many hours. I am given few, because these officers have empoisoned and influenced my employer to specifically limit my income to the level that I am unable to support myself, and I have had to reach out to public and private organizations seeking assistance, and even in doing so, these officers had interfered with my ability to obtain these benefits. They've slowed down the process. In most of the situations, I've been able to overcome the drag time with basically having to jump through many, many hoops, and not just the regular many, many hoops, but extra ones, where they've slowed down these processes in order to make my life a living hell. So if all this wasn't enough, these board officers have also developed torture techniques using this detection sensor. But this is my problem. This is my problem, and I am trying my best to stop them. I have filed another lawsuit against them, and I'm going to grab this for a moment to just show. I filed a lawsuit against them, which is right here, something like close to 80 pages, 75 pages, 74. I filed a motion to unseal the warrant that has given them authorization to use electronic surveillance against me, and in order to challenge it, I've submitted a motion for an expedited hearing, because when I first filed the suit, I started a second job hunt, but then again they interfered with my efforts to find a job, and so I put in this motion for an expedited hearing to try and gain injunctive relief against their illegitimate tactics. And here I've put in a motion for an emergency motion for orders to preserve evidence. As I said, these officers have made hundreds and hundreds of smear calls over the past year, and they have talked my family into changing cell phone companies, where this was the service that they used to make these 700 smear calls that led to my ostracism by my family and my isolation. I was forced out after 3 months, where previously they had given me an open door to stay as long as I needed to get back up on my feet. I was kind of relatively homeless in the sense that I had to live in a motel for a couple of weeks before I found an inexpensive apartment in a questionable part of town. But on the day that I moved into that apartment, my first job I was fired from, and so I was unemployed for the next 6 weeks. And then I got this new low-wage job that I've been at ever since. But you know, I'll get weekly checks of $50, $75, $80. I mean, in a good my first week, and recently, because I've been sending these emails almost on a daily basis, requesting, please let me have more work. Why am I not getting more work? You know, please let me have more work. I've gotten a few more hours, but still not enough to support myself. But and all because of the constant smear calls that these dirty officers have been and are making. But, you know, as I was showing you, but I'm no lawyer. I mean, this has taken a lot of time, but I've had a lot of time because I'm not allowed to work and I'm not allowed to find a decent job. And so I've been able to spend some time at a library, the law library, and a computer lab at a library to produce these, but it's hard and it's time consuming, and I'm not a lawyer. And these dirty officers, these Indianapolis Police Department officers have even stigmatized the lawyers that I've contacted seeking representation that have shown some interest in my case. I mean, that's how committed, committed and important they feel it is to maintain this false microcosm of isolation and ostracism. My neighbors avoid me. They've been poisoned against me. I mean, it's really, I have a really boring life for these dirty officers, for these Indianapolis police officers to watch and monitor for the last year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for nearly 365 days. I guess probably some of you are asking why. Why would officers be so cruel, be so inhumane, and execute such a vicious, you know, actions? And the answer is there are a couple of reasons, a few reasons. First of all, they want to stop the suit. That's when they actually started the use of pain infliction by censor, is when I was working the first time on an amended complaint, because my first one wasn't good enough. And actually my amended one didn't turn out to be good enough because it was, my case was dismissed without prejudice, which means that, you know, my complaint wasn't good enough, or I didn't know what I was doing well enough, so they needed to start it over. I needed to try again. Well, after that was dismissed back in December, I was forced by these officers, having been fired from my first job, to seek new work and then seek public assistance, because I had just moved into an apartment that I paid, you know, first month on, and I wouldn't have been able to keep it had I not obtained some rental assistance and found a job. But I've never been able to pay the rent on this apartment for 1 month based solely on the income that I've been making from this job. Not 1 month, and my rent is $365 a month. So their first purpose is to stop this suit, and they've even used tactics and methods to engineer a false offense in which to charge me with. They have enlisted my employer in that effort. They have adapted the torture that they use in order to pursue that effort. These folks are, these officers are, you know, I'm trying not to be dismissive or insulting, but it's difficult. I'll be honest with you. They are it's just surreal. It's just surreal how vicious these Indianapolis police officers are in regards to their assaults and their interference in every aspect of my life, because I am trying to stop them from their criminal, unconstitutional, and cruel tactics and methods. Another reason is that they definitely want to conceal their misconduct. You know, that's why they want to stop the suit. They want to hide what they've done, but they also want to hide their malfeasance. In this year that they have been utilizing this drone that requires at least 2 officers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for nearly 365 days, and not just that, but additional officers as well. They have even put in a, what do they call it? A stakeout, but it's even worse than that, and I won't go into too much of those details, but collectively, I estimate that the cost of this harassment and persecution campaign is something in excess of $800,000. So these folks do not want to be embarrassed. These folks are going to work very hard to find some justification to take action against me for the simple purpose that they don't want to look like embarrassingly incompetent buffoons. Sorry. Sorry. I wanted to avoid that. Let's see. But finally, you know, ultimately, one of their purposes, the reason for all this, is malice-ridden vengeance. They can't comprehend that someone, particularly a nobody. I mean, I moved home. This is where I'm from, although I've been in California for many, many years, with no job, but I had my family support and promised to help me. Well, they stole that away from me right away. I came back here because in California is where this all began, insofar as a couple of employers that I had threatened to sue for giving me a bad reference falsely incited the police against me there, and I had a very rough time there, and I was forced out of my home of 15 years and into this horrible residential hotel. And you know, my brother and sister-in-law were so kind and so gracious, and kept over the course of the months that I was in regular contact with them to continue to persist in trying to convince me to come back here, which I was hesitant to do. But they talked me into it. Actually, it was my sister-in-law who finally did it. We had a long conversation about a month or so before I decided to move. And it was my sister-in-law, after I got here, that these officers of Indy PD focused on, and who most of those 700 calls went to, and who was enlisted to assist with empoisoning other family members against me, wrongfully, cruelly, unjustifiably. But they have to keep up this smear campaign, because they have to keep up these calls, because they have to keep spreading their falsehoods, because it has no legs unless they are constantly in someone's ear saying what a bad person I am. Because anyone who interacts with me for any length of time realizes that these things aren't true, and they see the incongruence between what these officers are saying and what their personal experience is in interacting with me. And if those falsehoods, you know, that I'm a thief or that I'm a threat of some kind, were stopped, people would rely on their own judgment, and they would, you know, they immediately recognize that this is a falsehood, even when they start to suspect, when the officers have been caught in a lie. And that recently happened, where they were caught in a lie, where they were saying that I was carrying weapons on my person, in my pockets, or in my ankles, I guess in my socks or something. So on one day, after having a dozen people staring at my pockets, I emptied all of them. You know, I emptied all of them. And I carry a bunch of crap in my pocket because I have no privacy, and I have a lot of evidence that I've collected over the year on flash drives. And I keep those with me wherever I go. I keep this camera. Digital camera is the bane of dirty cops. Of renegade officers. So I do carry a lot of things in my pocket, so I pulled them all out, and I show, for anyone who was willing to look, and I pulled out the material out of the pockets and the pants so everyone could see no weapons. Well, after lunch, where other smear calls had occurred, the eyesight went to my pant legs. So all of a sudden, these dirty cops have told my coworkers that, oh no, if he doesn't have if he doesn't have some weapon in his pockets, he has them in his pant legs, right? So I conspicuously, pull up my pant leg to tie both of my shoes to make sure that, again, anyone who was willing to watch could see that they had lied to them. And so the rest of that day and the next day, people were actually nice to me, but these dirty officers couldn't allow that to happen, so they started again with whatever dirty calls that they were saying. Don't talk to him. He's, this or that or the other, and then very quickly it went back to ostracism and isolation, and where before initially it had been hostility. After you file a suit, wow, people become so artificially nice. It's kind of bizarre, but now I'm treated where they don't want to interact with me, but they're forced to. They're polite and courteous. So at least for the duration of the lawsuit. Anyway, gosh, I don't want this to go on forever because I know people are busy and they don't necessarily want to watch this thing forever. Let's see, incited. So like I said, this is my problem, and I'm sorry to have shared it all with you, but in the course of what the purpose of the video was, which was to explain, to discuss the use of one of these sensors as a torture device, as well as to discuss other misconduct by these Indianapolis police officers. But that's my problem. What they're doing to me and what they've done to me over the past year, I'm trying to fight it. But if you do know a lawyer, I am seeking a lawyer. If you are a lawyer, or you know a lawyer, or you know someone who knows a lawyer that is willing to take this case and who will not be, who will be wary of dishonest Indianapolis police officers, or will not be easily coerced by dishonest Indianapolis Police Department officers, then please comment on my video and provide me with some contact information for these lawyers, because I'm looking for one, because I'm not one. And the suit is slowly progressing. I'm waiting, hopefully, for an answer regarding my motion for a expedited hearing. Anyway, but what is everyone's problem is the weaponization of the domestic skies by these devices. So I would, contact your representatives. Contact your representatives and demand disclosure. Demand a full disclosure. Demand, what is it called? It's called, I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize. So contact your representatives, demand transparency, demand full disclosure, demand for the time being that any weapon on the surveillance drone be removed temporarily until laws are passed, until regulations are put into effect. where, to protect citizens with severe penalties for the misuse of these devices. Seek Freedom of Information Act requests for full disclosure about the nature and type of any sensor or any potential sensor that is going to be used in these devices. You can contact the Department of Homeland Security or the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, or even your local county or city governments requesting that they are putting in a Freedom of Information Act requesting this information. And don't accept the excuse or the denial based on national security, where they want to keep these technologies a secret for national security purposes. Because does that mean that U.S. citizens are now considered national security risks, where these devices and this technology is being rolled out to local law enforcement to be used on U.S. citizens? Yeah, that isn't a legitimate excuse at all. Okay. Sorry, folks. I do so myself. I would submit these Freedom of Information requests. Well, I have done the requests, and they haven't been answered, or if they have, they haven't given me any information, because one of the exceptions to providing information to someone who requested is if they are under scrutiny by local law enforcement. So I couldn't even get it even if I wanted to. But you can, and you should. The Department of Homeland Security has a Freedom of Information Act telephone line, and it is 202-254-4001. That's 202-254-4001. Don't permit the secret weaponization of our skies. This reminds me of that trick question. Does a tree falling in the forest make a sound if no one is there to hear it? Well, in this situation, that question could be, do U.S. citizens have constitutional rights where they are ignorant of the violation by the very government officials that are sworn to uphold them? Right? Stated another way, do we have our most cherished and fundamental protections of our liberties where we are kept in ignorance that our government has taken them away? Some of the people who will see this video will disagree with who I am as a gay liberal Democrat. But after the experience of the grave abuse of government power that I have been exposed to, and learned about and learned from that experience and what they're doing, I empathize. I have a newfound respect for those who question the authority of government. And I think that we can agree, even if you don't agree with my politics, that the liberties that this government program or action is so wide-sweeping and may have such impact on diminishing our liberties that it needs to be questioned. It needs to be potentially stopped, but there needs to be a debate on it. And particularly that they're keeping it secret. Thank you very much. I've posted other videos. I'm sure I will post more in the future. I encourage you again to contact your legislatures to make Freedom of Information Act requests and to stop the misuse of these devices. The Pandora's box has been opened by these officers where there are no laws to protect. There are no laws or penalties for misuse. Stop this from happening. Thank you. I appreciate your time.